Today we are going to dive deep into a series of reports about discussions on a movie that, look, is making waves, Avengers Doomsday. Definitely. We have here a bunch of information, script, some supposed behind-the-scenes dramas, Marvel's working style. What is our mission here? To try to understand what might really be going on behind the scenes, and to separate fact from what is just a rumor. Let's go ahead and unpack this.
Exactly. And what's most interesting is precisely seeing how these pieces of information from various sources sometimes fit together perfectly, other times clash head-on, right? It ends up painting a very complex picture of this production, which is gigantic. That's it. Let's analyze what we have, try to connect the dots, and maybe understand the bigger implications for the future of the MCU, Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Well, one point that immediately sparked a lot of conversation is the Doomsday script. According to what people are saying around, it still isn't finished even though filming is already in full swing. That's a bit alarming, isn't it? Some sources speak almost as if it's a sign of a crisis. Look, the initial concern is totally understandable, especially with all the buzz this causes on the internet.
But anyway, it's important to put things into context, right? The sources we analyzed compare this directly with the process in Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame, which were, the peak of the previous saga, the Infinity Saga. The directors, the Russo brothers, and the writers, McFeely and Marcus, also worked with scripts that kept changing during filming, making important adjustments right up until close to the release.
That's true. I remember some stories of them filming huge scenes for Endgame that didn't even make it into the final movie. So this flexibility, or perhaps this more calculated improvisation, isn't exactly new to this team, right? Correct? And Kevin Feige, the boss at Marvel Studios, according to these sources, defends this approach, saying it's part of Marvel's way of making movies, even with the more recent criticisms about the quality of some projects post-Endgame, right? Essentially, it's a method they used when they were at their creative and box office peak. So it makes sense to want to revive what worked, but then comes that inevitable comparison that the sources bring up. James Gunn over at DC is known for starting filming when the script is about 100% finalized and approved. They have very different philosophies.
Exactly. They are different methodologies, and the central point emerging from these sources is not just whether the script is ready or not, but whether this Marvel model that has worked so well historically, this almost improvisational blockbuster model, can still deliver quality consistently now in this current phase, the multiverse saga, which is much more interconnected and complex.
Human. Maybe this suggests that they need to evolve a bit in this method. And the curious thing is that even with this supposed lack of definition in the overall script, reports are saying that several important actors have already finished their recordings. How does that work? Yes, the sources confirm this. Actors would have completed their main roles.
Of course, the door for reshoots always remains open in their model. Yes. But this suggests that while the full script may be changing, the specific character arcs or key sequences are probably already well-defined and have been filmed. It's like assembling a giant puzzle, where some parts are already fitted even though the final design is still being adjusted.
Okay. Stepping a bit away from the script and into the part everyone loves, the gossip, right? There have been reports of a serious fight between two big-name actors on the set of Doomsday. And these online speculations, as sources mention, are throwing around names like Robert Downey Jr. and Ryan Reynolds. What concrete information do we have about this? Is there anything?
Look, we have to be very calm, very cautious indeed. The sources we have indicate that these reports emerged in pop culture discussion programs. They specifically mention names like John Rocha, Christian Harloff, and are based on third-party information.
That famous heard it said? The famous heard it said? Classic?
Exactly. There is no confirmation of physical assault, nothing of that sort, just a somewhat more heated disagreement. But is there any truth to it? One of the sources we analyzed sheds a different light, raising a very intriguing hypothesis. What if all of this is just a marketing strategy planted by the studio itself to generate buzz, keep the film in everyday conversation, even though the release is so far away? This possibility is fascinating, isn't it? And it's not something to dismiss outright. We've already seen Marvel use controlled leaks, strategic interactions on social media very effectively in the past.
It's true. The somewhat confusing situation regarding Ryan Reynolds' participation, which was first confirmed by a major outlet like Hollywood Reporter and then denied by another like Deadline, could be part of this tactic, whether to keep confidentiality or to generate exactly this kind of debate we're having now.
But on the other hand, the sources also make a point of highlighting the professionalism of this cast, right? Robert Downey Jr., for example, is described by colleagues like Vanessa Kirby as a very unifying leader on set. It's kind of hard to imagine a fight so serious that it would disrupt production at this level. I don't know.
This marketing idea seems like a bit of a high risk for the actor's image, don't you think?
It's a good counterpoint. Yes. The history of most of these actors is one of exemplary professionalism. Of course, conflicts can happen in any work environment, especially in a high-pressure setting like a filming set of this size, right? No doubt. But the idea of a physical fight or a disagreement that halts production seems less likely. This perhaps reinforces the marketing theory, or what I think is more probable, that a small incident was greatly exaggerated as the rumor spread.
And connecting these rumors with the production itself, there is a part that I found quite interesting. One of the sources provides details of an interview with Alan Cumming for the role of Nightcrawler. He described a very peculiar filming experience in Doomsday.
Yes, his account is very revealing about Marvel's current production methods. Cumming said that he filmed his scenes almost in isolation, with heavy use of green screens, those backgrounds for digital scene insertion, then facial replacement technology that allows digitally altering the face, right, of the actor or a stuntman.
Wow, and even fake names for the characters in the partial scripts he received. He even said that at many times he didn't even know who he was acting opposite to. Wow, this confirms a level of secrecy that seems to go beyond what we've seen before. Remember those stories of fake scripts and scenes shot separately in Infinity War and Endgame? But it seems they've now taken it to another level.
Precisely. It confirms the extensive use of body doubles and digital techniques, not only for visual effects, but also as a central tool to protect plot secrets at all costs. And this raises an important question that sources are debating. Is it just to avoid spoilers, or does it also reflect a way to optimize logistics that must be super complex and perhaps even reduce costs in certain shoots with actors who have complicated schedules or very high salaries?
And speaking of stunt doubles and costs, one of the sources mentions another unconfirmed version, of course, regarding that so-called drama on set. The suggestion is that the misunderstanding was not between actors, but rather due to the use of a stunt double for Robert Downey Jr. Supposedly, RDJ rejected the footage shot with the stunt double, demanding to redo the scenes himself, which inflated the costs and caused some friction during production.
It's just another hypothesis that's circulating, right? Although without any official confirmation, but it touches on a sensitive point. Why pay an astronomical salary to a star like RDJ and then perhaps use a stunt double in most of the action scenes? Exactly. On the other hand, the level of secrecy that Cumming described and the hypotheses about RDJ indicate the logistical complexity and the extreme measures the studio is taking, whether for security, cost, creative control, or a mixture of all these.
Changing the focus a bit now to the narrative itself, a criticism that arose in some discussions and that the sources we saw address is the perception of a lack of solid emotional development for Doomsday. They compared it to the over 10 years it took to reach iconic moments like Captain America lifting Mjolnir, right? Thor's hammer in Endgame.
Where are those moments that make us throw popcorn in the air with excitement? Initially, it seems like a fair critique, especially if we only look at the timeline of the current multiverse saga. But an analysis of the sources leads us to a broader and honestly more interesting perspective. If we consider the introduction or return of legacy characters like the X-Men from the Fox movies, the versions of Spider-Man played by Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, the emotional buildup has actually been happening for over 20 years, since the beginning of modern superhero cinema in the 2000s.
So the big popcorn moment wouldn't necessarily be the climax of a storyline that started in the latest MCU films, but rather the very meeting of these characters from different eras and studios on the same screen, like seeing Toby, Andrew, Hugh Jackman, RDJ, maybe Patrick Stewart as Professor X all together. That completely changes the perspective of emotional buildup. Make sense?
Exactly. The impact would come from this generational encounter, a construction that goes beyond the saga of Infinity and even the MCU as we knew until recently. It would be the culmination of decades of superhero cinema history. And furthermore, the sources reinforce confidence in the project because of the return of the Russo brothers, right? They would only have agreed to return after screenwriter Stephen McFeely presented an idea, a central story, that they found essential and powerful enough to be told. This suggests that there is indeed a strong narrative vision behind everything.
And speaking of characters with accumulated emotional weight, it's impossible not to mention Loki. His development in the solo series was, wow, incredible. From a charming and egocentric villain to the literal guardian of the multiverse sitting on that throne of Yggdrasil, the Tree of Time, which now supports all realities. How does he fit into Doomsday?
Loki's trajectory is, widely considered one of the most well-developed and satisfying character arcs in the entire MCU. His presence in Doomsday is seen in sources as potentially crucial. He could be the bridge between the TVA, the Time Variance Authority, that organization from his series, the multiverse he now protects, and the Avengers who will face Doctor Doom's threat.
It all makes sense. And of course, the expectation for a reunion between him and his brother Thor is very high, being pointed out by sources as a potential popcorn moment in itself. And knowing that Michael Waldron, who was the head writer of the first season of Loki, is involved in writing Doomsday, as sources confirm, provides an extra layer of security, right? That the character and his importance will be well handled.
Without a doubt, Waldron deeply understands Loki's journey, which fuels the speculation also mentioned in the sources about the character's final destiny. Given how complete his arc seems to have become, many fans and analysts speculate that a heroic sacrifice would be a powerful and thematically strong ending for him in Doomsday.
Imagine him perhaps saying something like, "My glorious purpose," before a final act of sacrifice. Wow, it would send shivers down the spine. It would be too impactful. It's a strong and very popular speculation among fans, as we see in the sources.
And besides Loki, the future of other loose ends is also being discussed, like that little piece of Venom's symbiote that was left behind at the end of Spider-Man, No Way Home. Oh, right. Will we see something in Spider-Man's next solo movie, which some are calling Brand New Day? Or will they save that for Secret Wars, the next film? There are theories, including one that suggests a connection with Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, who has already had his own traumatic experience with the symbiote.
Interesting. And all these discussions end up leading us to a broader issue that the sources also mention, the overall creative process of Marvel and Disney, specifically regarding how they hire talent. There is a debate about the importance of bringing in people who truly know and respect the original comic material versus prioritizing other agendas or bringing in new voices without necessarily having that specific background.
This reflects a larger discussion happening in Hollywood, you know? The criticism raised, which in the sources is associated with a commentator named Ballantyne, questions whether there was a period, perhaps around 2023, when Marvel and Disney, in general, may have prioritized certain social agendas or the pursuit of representation over a deep familiarity with the source material or proven experience in directing or scripting major franchises.
It is important to emphasize that we are reporting the perspective present in the sources, right? Yes, of course. The sources use as an example the controversy that arose with the casting of a black actor to play Snape in the upcoming Harry Potter series, sparking a debate about fidelity to the original material versus the pursuit of representation, which some believe should have limits based on the original work.
Exactly. The central argument that appears in these sources is that although new perspectives and representation are valuable, the history, the essence of the character, and respect for the source material should come first, especially in franchises with decades of history and a highly dedicated and knowledgeable fan base.
It's a delicate balance, isn't it, between allowing creative vision and maintaining fidelity to the roots that define these characters. The implicit suggestion in this line of reasoning is that the ideal would be to hire specialists in the source material to work alongside experienced screenwriters and directors. So what does all this mean? In the end, we have Avengers Doomsday, a film surrounded by expectations perhaps never before seen, a creative process that sparks intense debate, rumors of backstage conflicts that may or may not be real, and at the same time, the promise of an epic encounter of characters that could again redefine superhero cinema. It's a lot and a lot of pressure on just one film.
In fact, the analysis of the sources shows us a production with many facets, with layers and more layers of complexity. Marketing strategies may be blending with real production challenges in a way that makes it difficult to separate. The level of secrecy is extreme, perhaps even more than in previous projects like Ultimato. It seems so, but on the other hand, the trust in the names involved in the creation, such as the Russo brothers, Michael Waldron, and the immense emotional potential of reunions of iconic characters from different generations, these seem to be the major trump cards that keep the anticipation and excitement at stratospheric levels.
A question lingers in the air, perhaps in this universe of information, disinformation, leaks that can be calculated, and rumors that can be genuine. How much of what reaches us is a reflection of the real drama of artistic creation, with all its setbacks and challenges, and how much is in fact part of the spectacle itself? A performance carefully orchestrated by the gigantic marketing machine to keep us engaged, debating, and of course anxious until opening day. Something for us to reflect on while we wait.